You are about to be locked inside the Stingray Show, and coming up on this edition, we are going to be talking with the new head coach of Jacksonville State, who played defensive back at Auburn from 1986 through 1989. He was also an assistant coach at Jacksonville State, Georgia Tech, Florida State, Tennessee, Alabama, Colorado, and hey, he has won two national championships in college football, one with Florida State and the other one in 2020 with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Charles Kelly will join us right now on this edition of the Stingray Show. And with that, I want to welcome you inside another edition of the Stingray Show. We are about to get to a very special guest this evening who is now the newly head coach up at Jacksonville State, who was hired December the 20th of 2024. And our guest this evening, Coach Charles Kelly, has coached under some of the greats, including Terry Bowden down at Auburn, also with Paul Johnson at Georgia Tech, Jimbo Fisher at Florida State, Deion Sanders at Colorado, and the great Nick Saban at Alabama. Ladies and gentlemen, please help us welcome to the Stingray Show the new head man of Jacksonville State, Charles Kelly. Coach Kelly, how are things with you?
Doing good. Everything's busy. Of course, this time in college football, the way things are right now, it never slows down. But that's a good thing. We hit the ground running. Of course, Rich Rod and his staff had done a really good job here before we took over. But there were a lot of players to replace. The day after I took the job, I kind of going through the depth charts and the roster and realized, hey, we only had 47 guys on scholarship and one quarterback, so we had a lot of work to do. But our staff's done a good job. It's been a lot of fun, and, we got a long way to go before we start playing games.
So, Coach, let's go back to where it all started for you in Ozark, Alabama. How difficult was it for you to decide to play college football for Auburn instead of Alabama?
Well, I'll back up before that. My dad was a high school football coach, longtime coach. I've been going to fall camp since I was 5 years old. When I was, old enough to get out of the house by myself, my mom, she let us go with with my dad. So I grew up around, sports all my life. My dad coached all four sports. Of course, he was the head coach. Head football coach, head basketball coach, did everything. So I was around sports the whole time. So growing up, I can remember going to the coaches' clinics in Tuscaloosa when Coach Bryant was the head coach there. And, when I was a kid, growing up watching Jeff Rutledge, Richard Todd, Stedman Shealy, all those guys that played at Alabama at that time. And then, of course, Pat Sullivan at Terry Beasley at Auburn. Those guys. My mom was actually an Auburn fan. My dad probably, he was a fan of everybody. Wherever his players played, that's who he kind of followed.
Yeah.
So, I was familiar with a lot of different schools. And growing up in the state of Alabama, you kind of pick which way you're going to go. So as a young, as a young guy, I probably paid attention a little bit more to Alabama just because I knew a lot of the players. And then, there was an assistant coach at Alabama at that time that recruited our area, signed a lot of players. His name was Pat Dye. And Coach Dye was, he was, I don't know, I can remember him from the time he was coaching at Alabama. And, about the time he came to Auburn, I started paying attention to Auburn a little bit more and watching what he was doing. So, I was a fan of both programs. And then when, as I got in high school and started playing, of course, I played all four sports. And, when I got to be about a sophomore, junior in high school, I'd been to camps at both places and had been to Coach Dye's camp. And, I guess I was probably 14, 15 years old. Coach Dye told me, he said, we're probably not going to be able to offer you at Auburn. I was a wishbone quarterback. Everybody was running the wishbone at that time.
Right.
But everybody was transitioning to the pro-style offense.
Mm-hmm.
So, the smaller, quarterbacks that could really play like a point guard, that was kind of going by the wayside. So, I had opportunities to go to Troy, some other smaller schools. Chan Gailey was actually the head coach at Troy at that time. And I was actually planning to go to Troy, and that's where I had committed to. And he takes an assistant coach's job with the Denver Broncos.
Right.
So I kind of back up and kind of look at everything. I knew at a young age I wanted to coach.
Right.
I wanted to coach. I knew that's what I was going to do. I kind of, I was realistic. I think having a father that was a, head coach, kind of, I was realistic about, having an opportunity to play pro ball and things like that. I knew I wanted to play college football. And honestly, I wanted to play in the SEC.
Right.
So, when Coach left, I called Coach Dye back, and Coach said, listen, I still can't offer you, but I want you to be a part of our program. And that's when I decided to walk on at Auburn.
Gotcha.
And, it was one of the toughest decisions I've ever made, but it was the best decision I ever made. He told me, when I got there, he said, I won't make any promises, but if you finish this and go through this, he said, you'll have something that'll last you the rest of your life. And he was right.
So, Coach, you were a part of something in your second season at Auburn that is crazy to think about today. You guys tied twice, once against Tennessee, 20-20, and the other one was against Syracuse in the Sugar Bowl, 16-16. Coach, what was that like to tie in a football game?
Well, back then, there was no tiebreaker. There was no overtime in college football. So I think, coaches had to make decisions based on where you were at in the standings, whether it be the SEC, whatever. It was just another analytic that went into the game, of trying to win a championship. And, that year we tied at Tennessee, I mean, that gave us an opportunity later on to win the SEC championship. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I can remember the ball game. Of course, at that time, it was well publicized because, Coach went for the tie down there. Coach McMahon, I think it was Coach McMahon at Syracuse. He was furious, and as Coach Dye always was, he was unapologetic.
Right.
He did what he felt like was best for the team, and but it was a different day. I mean, you played the game different. Nowadays, when if you've got the ball with a minute left to go on the 50-yard line, you can if I play for the tie, then I know I'm gonna have a chance to win the game in overtime.
Oh yeah.
So there's different strategies that you can go about. You don't have to take as many chances, I would say. But I think the overtime, I think it's helped college football. I think it's exciting. One of the most exciting games I've ever been a part of was this past year at Texas A&M.
Yes.
And then of course when I was at Bama, we lost a couple of tough ones in overtime. Mm-hmm. One to LSU and one to Tennessee. And we had a pretty good football team that year.
Right.
Just shows how things can go.
But, Coach, looking back at your entire Auburn career, you went undefeated in the Iron Bowl against Alabama. What are some of your fondest memories of playing in the Iron Bowl from 1986 through 1989?
Well, first of all, the greatest memory that I have was the 1989 game at Auburn. It was the first time that the Iron Bowls had ever been played at Auburn.
Right.
That was a big push by Coach Dye to get that done. And he promised the Auburn people that he would do that. And it came to it came to light that day. That was an electric day in Auburn. Alabama had a very good football team, Coach Curry, and then we're undefeated.
Yep.
We had a good football team. We lost a couple of tough games that year. We lost to Tallahassee at Florida State. We lost to Tennessee earlier in the year, but that was unbelievable. The atmosphere, the fans. I was telling somebody last week, everybody's got a walk now, whether they Walk of Champions or Tiger Walk at Auburn. But I can remember the Tiger Walk being the original walk. I mean, walking from Sewell Hall to Jordan-Hare, and then it kind of got really publicized during that '89 Alabama game because there were so many people there. I don't know how many thousands of people were at that Tiger Walk, but it was unbelievable. There were some great performances in that game, on both sides of the ball. I mean, on both teams. But that was it was a big game for both teams, for both sides, and to have that bragging right. I still going to Legion Field and playing. We always went up there and practiced the week before we played. So we would go up there. We always had an open date the week before we played the Iron Bowl at that time.
Right.
And we would go up there and practice. And just growing up, watching the games that were played in Legion Field, watching, remembering the people that, played there as you were growing up, and then having an opportunity to play there. And we had some really good games there too. So it was a good time, and that was a good time for Auburn during those years.
Oh,
I think Coach Dye always did a good job. Everybody asked me, they said, well, what was it? What was the difference? I mean, we worried about us. We didn't worry about anybody else.
Yeah.
And that's what Coach Dye emphasized.
So, Coach Kelly, your first college experience as a coach came as a GA at Auburn in 1993 under Terry Bowden. Talk about that season of getting your first taste of college coach in a season where Auburn went 11-0 and undefeated.
I want to back up just a step because I was my first coaching job. I got hired by Wayne Trawick at Central High School in Phoenix City, Alabama.
Right.
Coach Trawick first of all, he was as great a man as I've ever worked for. Coach Dye had a lot of respect for him. Mm-hmm. We had a good team coming back. I'd been there 3 years. And I can remember Wayne Hall was the defensive coordinator at Auburn, who I'd played for. Coach Hall had come through recruiting that spring and told Coach Trawick that he wanted to hire me as a graduate assistant. And I'm thinking to myself, I've been poor all my life. I just gotten where I thought making money as a high school football coach, I thought I was the richest guy in the world.
Right.
But I was thinking, boy, if I go back in GA, I'm going to just be broke again. And I remember Coach Trawick talking to me, and Coach Trawick sat me down, and he's like, listen, he said, I don't want to lose you. He said, but I think you need to be coaching at that level.
Right.
And he said, you got an opportunity. So I took it, and it was, I hated leaving Central because we actually won the state championship in '93.
Right.
That was Coach Trawick's first championship. But I had an opportunity to coach college football. And listen, it was a dream come true. You're talking about a guy that played football at G.W. Long, Skipperville, Alabama, walked on at Auburn, had a chance to coach at my alma mater. And, Coach Hall gave me that opportunity. Coach Bowden gave me that opportunity. And that was the year, we went undefeated.
Right.
We went 11-0. And if we had not been on probation, we would have probably played Florida State for the national championship. And I'm not sure we weren't the best team in the country that year.
Yes.
We had some good players, and our chemistry was right.
So, Coach, you then became a part of the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets coaching staff in 2006 and stayed there until 2012. What are some of your fondest memories of being at Georgia Tech under Chan Gailey and then Paul Johnson?
Well, I can tell you about Coach Gailey now. This is crazy. You know, as I mentioned, Coach Gailey been the head coach at Troy. I had a lot of respect for him over the years. I mean, you want to talk about a great man now and a great football coach, very organized. But so I'm coaching at Nickel State, and I've been there 4 years. We had just won the Southland Conference, and honestly, I was at that time I had been, I guess not offered, but there was a high school here in the state of Alabama that was trying to get me to come back and be the head coach.
Right.
And I'm at the coaches convention, and I'm getting on the plane flying back to New Orleans. This guy walks up to me and he says, "Coach," he said, "you're Charles Kelly at Nickel State." And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "You're the one we're going to interview for the special teams coordinator's job." And I was like, "I think you got the wrong guy." And he goes, "No," he goes, "I think Coach Gailey's going to bring you in and he wants to talk to you about the special teams coordinator's job." And I was like, "I'm the defensive coordinator. I've never been a special teams coordinator." I said, "It must be another guy. It must be Chip Kelly or somebody else." So sure enough, I fly back to New Orleans, get back to Thibodeau the next morning. Coach Gailey calls me. And he's like, "I want to know if you'd be interested in the special team job." I said, "Coach, I've never been a special team coordinator." He said, "Well, guess what? When I took my first job in the NFL, neither had I." He said, "What I'm looking for is somebody," he said, "I want to change in what we're doing." And I'd always worked on special teams, but I was a defensive coordinator. So he said, "Can you I think this was Monday." He said, "Can you come in on, no, it was Wednesday. It was a Wednesday because he wanted me to come in on Friday. And I had one day to get ready."
Wow.
One day. So I knew what we were pretty good on special teams. So I went back and looked at all the stuff that we did. But I looked and I found the best special teams guy that I could find in the country. And I studied for 24 hours everything he did. And that guy's name was Urban Meyer. He was at Utah. And, they were unbelievable on special teams. So, I went through everything. I go and I do the interview on Friday. And, I remember he interviewed me. He interviewed a NFL special teams coordinator and an ex-college head coach. There were three of us.
Right.
And I'm thinking, there's no way I'm going to get this job, So anyway, he calls me back. I think the following Monday. I remember where I was at. I was crossing the Sunshine Bridge going over the Mississippi River. And he called and said, "Listen, I want to offer you this job." And he told me what the salary was. And I thought I was going to run off the bridge. He said, "That's all I can pay you." I was like, "What?" But I went in there and it was something that got me out of my comfort zone because we did it like the NFL. It was, I didn't have a bunch of assistant coaches coaching special team. I was the guy. I used the 4 GAs, the analysts to help me. And he wanted something different. And, in 2 years, I think we went to being one of the better teams in the country in special team. It was good. It probably taught me more about being a head coach doing that because people don't realize 1 out of every 6 plays in a game is a special teams play.
Yeah.
So you're always on edge. You're always thinking ahead. And it, wound up helping us win the championship at Florida State later on, when I was a special teams coordinator there and a lot of my experiences. But I had a great time with Coach Gailey. We won a lot of games. We won the Coastal Division my first year there. Right. And then, it was I learned a tough reality about college coaching. He was a great coach and won a lot of games, but we didn't win the right ones.
Yes.
And so they let him go the next year. And I watched a good man get let go. And then Paul Johnson took over. And, Coach gave me an opportunity when he first came in. But he didn't offer me a job right out of the gate. And actually Texas A&M had called me and they were going to offer me the safeties job and special teams coordinator. And then Coach Johnson, we went out recruiting one night and we talked for a couple of hours. He came back in that next morning and wanted me to stay. And You know, it was a good time. So I spent 7 years at Georgia Tech.
So, Coach, after that, you became the linebackers coach and won a national championship with Florida State and Jimbo Fisher. Coach, when did you know that 2013 Florida State team was going to be special?
All right, so yeah, we had played. My last game at Georgia Tech, we had played Florida State in the ACC championship game.
Yeah.
I'd been the defensive coordinator the year before at Georgia Tech, interim. Coach made a change at coordinator about the sixth game. Like we were 2-4. I mean, I was like, we're gonna miss a bowl game. Well, we came back and we made it the ACC championship game. We lost to Florida State like 21-17, 21-14, something like that. We beat USC in the Sun Bowl. That was Lane was coaching there then. They had a really good team. Well, on my way back from the Sun Bowl, Jimbo's wife, Candy, actually had sent me a message and said, Jimbo's trying to get in touch with you. And so I called him when I get back. And he's like, hey, don't sign anything anywhere else. I want to talk to you about coming here. So I became the special teams coordinator and linebackers coach at Florida State. And I went with Jeremy Pruitt, who I'm very close with, who I think a phenomenal defensive football coach, one of the best I've ever been around. It was he and I, Souse and Sari, Odell Higgins. We were the staff on that team, or on that defensive staff. You know, that spring practice when we started, I mean, this is the truth. After about 2 weeks, Pruitt comes in my office. He goes, I don't know if we'll win 4 games.
Right.
I mean, it was like, I didn't know. We were starting some new guys. People didn't know who Jameis Winston was yet. I mean, he had not played in college. We had him, Jacob Coker, Clint Trickett. All those guys were vying for the starting quarterback job. We were trying to find guys in the secondary. You know, the linebackers that I had, Christian Jones had played a good bit. Those others had not.
Right.
So, we certainly didn't think in the summer going in that we were going to play for the national championship.
Yes.
We just were taking it game by game.
Right.
And we opened up with Pitt. We played pretty good. We come back and play Bethune-Cookman. We did okay. Not to what we should have, but I can remember we went to Boston College. We played them up there, and they should have beat us. I mean, they went up and down the field on us. We couldn't stop them. We couldn't execute. Jameis made a heck of a play right before half to kind of get us back in it. We held on and won that game. And I remember on the plane coming back, Pruitt came back there and sat down with me, and he's like, listen, we got to look at a couple of things. And he said, we may need to make a couple changes on defense. And we did make a couple personnel changes that week. And we played Maryland the next week. Maryland had a pretty good team. I think some people were picking Maryland to beat us. And we played one of our best games. And from that game on, we started playing like really good. But it was the Miami game. We played Miami in Tallahassee. It was a night game. It was like the old Florida State Miami game. The atmosphere was unbelievable. Every celebrity you could imagine was on the sideline. It's the damnedest thing I ever been in. I mean, it was like crazy. And we won that game that night. And I think that put us at 8-0. And I can remember telling my wife, I was like, I got home and I was like, we got a chance.
Right.
We got a chance. And she said, I had not bought a vehicle in forever. I'll never forget this. She said, I said, if we win a national championship, I'm buying me a new truck. She said, you can buy anything you want. So the first thing I did when we won the national championship, I got on that bus and I said, I'm buying me a truck.
That's awesome. Now, Coach, what kind of truck was it?
Raptor.
Gotcha. Man, that's awesome.
Yes.
So, Coach, Backing up just a little bit,
Yep.
talk about what it is like for a coach to be in pressure situations of coaching in a national championship game, and especially against Auburn.
That was the first time I'd ever played against Auburn in my whole career.
Hmm.
That was the first time. It was really unique. I can remember coming out of the tunnel for pregame warm-up and the band playing. I can remember, hearing the fight song. Um, my wife had graduated from Auburn too. We had a lot of family that had, but once we started warming up, it was like it's crazy. It was like distantly went away.
Right.
And then once we kicked the ball off, it was the craziest thing. It was like nobody was in the stadium. It was
Right.
like no fans were there. It was just two teams playing football.
Yeah.
And pressure situations, and I believe this in playing. You got to do things over and over and over, all right? And you're going to create habits. That's why discipline's so important. And discipline's important for coaches too. I think that's why Coach Saban was so successful for so long, because of his self-discipline. Um, but when you're disciplined and you do things over and over, things become habit, and you react with your habits. You don't play the way you want to. You play the way you prepare to.
Yes.
You don't coach the way you want to. You coach the way you prepare to. So I thought we'd done a good job of, both those coaches, Jimbo and Nick, of, preparing the staff, preparing the players to be in those pressure situations.
Right.
There were a lot of special teams things that day or that night against Auburn that were critical in the game, and you just had to trust. We had to trust that we could execute it, and that hope that would be the difference.
So, Coach Kelly, right after the national championship season, you were promoted to the defensive coordinator of Florida State. Talk about that and what that meant to you to run the defense for Florida State.
Well, first of all, I thought Jeremy had done such a, uh, our entire staff. I mean, Jeremy would be the first to tell you he did a great job. He's a great play caller, but we had a good staff. I mean, Odell Hagens and Sal and all those guys were just really good coaches, good position coaches, and um, you know, I think when you find that you got guys in there that can, everybody's got something that they're really good at. And the key to being the leader, the head coach, or the coordinator is putting those guys in position where they can do the best things they can do to help the team. And, that's what I wanted to continue doing when I took over. Um, you know, Honestly, everybody thought that it was going to be easy because we had just won the national championship. The hardest thing to do in coaching is to recreate the same success that you had the year before.
Yeah.
Because you've reached the pinnacle, you have relax syndrome. It's just human nature. People reach they set a goal, they reach it. I'm going to relax. Well, when you relax, people are going to catch you.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest challenge, being able to get back to the playoffs. But I was, I enjoyed my time there, enjoyed the players that I coached there. And, I think we won 29 straight games, I think I think it was 29 straight games we won at Florida State.
So, Coach, you stayed at Florida State until 2018 when you became a part of the Tennessee coaching staff under your friend Jeremy
Yep.
Pruitt. What was that like, the transition for you of going from the ACC to the SEC?
Well, that was one of my goals, being able to coach in the SEC.
Right.
I'd always wanted to do that. I felt like the SEC was home. I wanted to, go back home and have an opportunity to coach. I I was really intrigued with, going to Tennessee, just a tradition.
Right.
Um, you know, the the school is a great university, great facilities, great stadium. I was really interested, and I wanted to help Jeremy.
Yeah.
Again, I felt like, and I think he's one of the best coaches that I've ever been around. I wanted to help him build that program. Um, you know, and listen, it was tough for me to leave.
Right.
It really was. But it was Tennessee was in a tough situation at that time.
Yeah.
They didn't have a lot of players. Um, he knew it was going to be a rebuilding deal. It was going to take a while, but he was ready for it, and he was. I felt like that first year we did a good job of bringing in. I mean, a lot of those guys that we brought in that first year. I mean, they were a part of the group that beat us when I was at Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember watching them thinking, dang, man, why I wish we hadn't recruited him there.
Right.
Because they were so good. But, I mean, it was a good time. And I would have stayed with Jeremy. There was nothing that I, disliked about my situation there. It just, I had the opportunity to, Coach Saban called me, and I had that opportunity, and I couldn't pass that up.
Now, speaking of that, you helped Alabama and Nick Saban win the national championship in 2020. Talk about that experience and especially the difficulties of trying to win a championship during COVID.
Well, I can tell you, I remember the day we were getting ready to start spring practice for that season. And we had gotten word that morning that, everybody was going to have to evacuate, that we were going to have to, separate, go home. And, really nobody in the world knew what was happening.
Right.
We didn't know if we were going to play. We didn't know if we were going to have a season. We didn't know if football was going to exist after that. And I mean, it was the unknown.
Right.
So when the pandemic hit, before we left, Coach Saban called a meeting with the players. And he called them in there and he talked to them. He never, it was just as calm, okay, this is our plan. This is what we are going to do.
Right.
We've got to continue. We've got to work out. We got to, we got to be accountable. We got to be accountable to each other. He laid the plan out.
Right.
Our strength coaches got up there and talked. I remember, we provided all the players with Apple Watches where we could monitor their working out. We, nobody could go to a gym, so we had to. All of our players had bands, strength bands, resistant bands that, that they could carry and work out with. We had running programs set up. When we left there that night, I can't remember. I think it was Pete Golding. I looked over and said, if we play next year, nobody will be close to us. Because I knew we were so much out. Coach Saban just was so much out in front of everybody of his plan of seeing what was down the road. And, we set up Zoom calls. We would staff meet every morning at 7:30, just like we were in the office. At 7:30, I mean, we went through the, what we needed to deal with, recruiting. After the staff meeting, we'd split up offense, defense. At about 11 o'clock, we had recruiting calls set up on Zoom. So we had different recruits getting on there with Coach Saban. And then at 1 o'clock every day, we had position meeting. So we had our own Zoom call, position meeting. And not one time, coaching the secondary, not one time was one kid ever late on that Zoom call.
Wow.
They were all sitting there waiting to start the call. I don't know if it was, I know it was because we felt like we could have a good team, but I think it scared the hell out of all of us that we might not be able to do this again.
I know.
And I think that was, they were like, if we get this opportunity. So yeah, it was, that was a crazy time. I was actually the first one to get tagged on the COVID test. When we came back in the summer, we did OTAs. I had a bunch of young players in the secondary that year. Malachi Moore, Bryant, both of them wound up starting that year. But we're opening up with Missouri, and the Sunday before we played, Jeff Allen calls me, and he goes, "Hey, you popped positive." I said, "I did not." I said, I don't feel anything." He goes, "I don't care, coach. You got to go home. You got to, whatever they call it." So I get home. I'm going to miss the first game.
Wow.
Nobody knew it. They didn't announce it to anybody. Nobody found out until the Saturday we played Missouri. They saw that I wasn't on the bus, and then they started asking Coach Saban all these questions. But the only thing I was worried about, two things. I was worried about Malachi and Brian, just being there for their first game.
Right.
I was worried about that. But the thing I worried about the most was this. I said, if people find out that I'm the first one to get COVID on the coaching staff, and Coach Saban gets COVID, they're going to blame that on me.
Right.
And they're going to hold that against me the rest of the year. So I was so glad that he didn't get COVID that week.
Right.
I'm glad it was later on. He got it the week we played Auburn. He had one false positive, but he actually had it the week we played Auburn. And I'm like, at least they couldn't put that on me that I'm the one that gave it to him.
Right. So, Coach, you were then hired by Colorado and head coach Deion Sanders to be his defensive coordinator. What was your relationship like with Deion, and how did that opportunity of going to Colorado come about?
So, I've known Deion throughout the years, followed him, had a lot of respect for him. He's a very unique man.
Yeah.
Very disciplined, very faithful. I will say that. People ask me all the time, and I'm like, he's one of the most disciplined people that I've ever been around. You can't do the things that he's done and not be disciplined. You can't play baseball at a world-class level and play football at a world-class level unless you're disciplined.
Yeah.
You can't do that. He is like that. If you watch his players behave like they're supposed to. They do the things that they're supposed to do. And but when he was at Jackson State, I was at Alabama, and I actually went over and worked with his staff on some stuff. Practice schedules, things like that. We clinicked for a couple of days, and he told me, he said, if I get one of these jobs, I'd like for you to come with me.
Right.
And when he took the job, he asked me to come. For me, it was the challenge of it. I can remember when I took the job. Of course, all the media was there. There was a specific media person that interviewed me out there, and he told me, he said, "Coach, you realize this may be the worst roster in the history of the NCAA in Division I."
Yeah.
And he said, "Did you realize it was this bad?" And I was like, "Well, I knew it was bad. I didn't realize it was this bad."
Right.
But we went in there and started getting the guys we felt like could compete, and we almost had it turned that first year. I mean, we won 4 games, should have won 6. I will say that year the Pac-12 was really good. They had. Listen, when you got the NFL quarterbacks that they had in it that year, you had Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, you had Shador,
Yeah.
Penix. There were some guys in that league, and we felt like we were turning the corner. We felt like this year that we had a chance to be pretty good this year. And then it's kind of like when I was at Tennessee, I had an opportunity to come back to Auburn,
right,
to where I played. That was the first time in my career that I really had that chance. So I was like, you know what? I'm getting on up in age. I might not have that opportunity again. So that's when I went to work with Coach Freeze.
So, Coach, what was that experience like last season of coaching at Auburn under head coach Hugh Freeze?
Well, first of all, Coach Freeze is a tremendous man. He's a good football coach. He's he was as good to work for as any guy that I've been around. He lets his coaches coach. Um, he let DJ and I. He let us take the defense and mold it in what we felt like was going to be beneficial. Um, and going back in that stadium as a part of that, I mean, there are no words to describe what it was like. My first time back in that stadium, um, and a lot of memories, a lot of, we were young in a lot of positions last year, and we were close in a lot of. I mean, that season could have been, there could have been 4 games different.
Yeah.
Really easy. So, I mean, I know he's got the personnel. He's recruited very well, since he's been there. So he's got the roster back to where, SEC caliber. Listen, it is in the SEC now. It is dog eat dog. I mean, there's a lot of good coaches in the league. There's a lot of good recruiters in the league.
Yeah.
And I mean, just think about it. Just draw the radius around you and look at the people that are around you. And you see, it's a tough deal. But I think Coach has got it going in the right direction.
Coach, I've got 3 questions left for you, and then we will let you get out of here. The first one: what is your favorite Jimbo Fisher story that you can share with us, please?
Funny or just a good story?
Either one.
All right, so I got his, and I got to give him a lot of credit on this. So we're getting ready for the national championship game.
Right.
So we are practicing in Tallahassee, and it is the last practice before we go we take a 3-day break, and then we go to LA. So on our last day of practice, we do a 2-minute drill, and our 2-minute drill at Florida State and Alabama is as competitive as anything you've ever seen. Right. I mean, it is like you playing for the national championship. So I don't know if we're trying to, everybody's wanting a break, Christmas break, whatever. But, Jameis is not playing the way he's supposed to. We're not playing the way we're supposed to and I mean, Jimbo is he is upset now. He is upset. And if anybody knows Jimbo, knows that Jimbo will remove a player from the field quick.
Yes.
Quickly. And all the players knew it. The coaches knew it. But I've never seen him do his quarterback. So we're at this 2-minute drill. And I mean, he is just furious. He sends Jameis off the field.
Wow.
Yes. The last day we're in Tallahassee. And he is pissed. And everybody's like, yeah, that's the Heisman Trophy winner.
Right.
And everybody's like wanting to go get him. And he said, no, don't go get him. He said, everybody's going to go by. So anyway, it was everybody that was there that day, it was like, oh boy, I wonder how this is going to be. When we get that ball back at the end of that game, we get it in a 2-minute situation.
Yeah.
And when we got the ball, I threw the headset, I pulled my mic down, and I was like, Pruitt, I said, we're going to win this because of that 2-minute deal we had before we left. It was crazy the way we had to, and Jameis moved that team down the field. It was just,
right.
It was crazy. But there was a lot of stuff, like in recruiting with Jimbo, that was, he's funny, he's intense, but I give him a lot of credit for that. And it was just amazing how it just came back to that situation, the same situation that we had worked in practice.
So, Coach, moving on, what is your favorite Nick Saban story that you can share with us? And Nick Saban always gets everybody at some point. What was a time that he chewed you out?
There are a few of them. You know, and the one thing about Coach was it was never you never felt like it was personal.
Right.
When he did it, you're like, you know what, I deserve this. You know, I really deserve this. Um, I don't know. One time I got a player. I don't want to call the player out, but
Okay.
I got a player that he's he's all he's in his feelings because he's not playing the way he's supposed to play and wants to play, and he's getting real emotional, and he I don't know he's over there. He's not not stretching, not flexing, not doing what he's supposed to, and then we start practicing. He's just kind of loafing his ass around. And, I mean, coach is like, "Hey man, what's wrong with this dude?" And I'm like, "Coach, I don't know. He's in his feelings today." And he anyway, I go over there, and so I'm rotating these guys. So I'm gonna put him in with the first group. I go over there, and the kid won't go in. And it's his practice, and I walk back over there, and I said he's not going with the one. And my ass, But anyway, later on in practice, the kid just blows somebody up. I mean, he's playing hard. I mean, he blows the guy up. Hey, coach is over there. I mean, I got the guy playing like he's supposed to play, He goes, "Hey, man." He goes, "This guy's going to hurt somebody." He goes, "We got to slow this guy down." And I'm like, "Coach, we were trying to get him going. Now we got him going." But, I think that was, I mean, I can remember that. There were some in in meetings where coach was, coach just wanted things done right.
Right.
And I mean, some of the best were like recruiting stories. Oh, I should have told this one to begin with. So the first day I was ever out recruiting with him, first day, they put me on a plane. I mean, I got to go from LaGrange, Georgia. We fly to Chattanooga. Then we fly back to Montevallo or Shelby County Airport, and then back to Tuscaloosa, all in one day. So anyway, this is my first day with him. So the first school we get to, they got a damn parade. I'm waiting on him at the school. He's like, and coach is going to sign every autograph. And I'm like, we are going to be late. We are, Anyway, we get back in the car, going to the airport. He says, "Hey, coach, we got to learn how to go in these back doors now. We're not ever going to make these schools." Anyway, we get to, get back to the plane. We get to Chattanooga. We go to this school. We go up and see the coach. I knew the coach. And, I noticed this guy looking at us when we walked back to the car. And I'm like, this guy's following us. He's going to come up to the car. Well, he doesn't. I get in the car, pull out. I'm driving a car. I'm driving a Tahoe. I pull out of this parking lot, and this guy is filming Nick Saban from behind in his car while I stop at a red light, and this guy runs into the back of me.
Oh, no.
Boom! And I'm like, and coach is like, "Hey," he goes, "did he mean to do that?" And I mean, I got out of the car. I said, "Stay here, coach." Boy, I got out. I went back there. I had a few choice words, and I looked at my bumper. It was okay. But, the guy's like, I'm sorry. And I'm thinking, I am going to get my ass fired today, the first day on the job, because somebody runs over me while I got Coach Saban out here recruiting. But, I mean, I could go through, I'll probably think about 10 more this afternoon.
Right. So, Coach, this has been a blast. The final question I have for you, because you mentioned it in the first segment, you were around Coach Bryant a lot as a kid. What is your favorite Coach Bear Bryant story that you could share with us, please?
Coach, so I remember seeing him like when I would go to the coaches' clinics with my dad. or I would see Coach speak. I think my favorite story was my father was the president of the Coaches Association one year, and there was a banquet in Tuscaloosa, and my mom and dad got to sit at the head table right by Coach Bryant.
Wow.
And of course, I had to, I was sitting on the floor. I was probably in the third or fourth grade, probably. Um, when Coach Bryant left that night, he left a pack of cigarettes and a lighter on the table. And Coach left, and of course, people were talking to him as he was leaving. And my mom told my dad. My mom said, "Coach left his cigarettes. I'm going to grab these and take them to him." So my mom went down there, gave Coach the cigarette. He thanked her, and I remember my dad saying, if you'd have just kept those cigarettes and lighter, you know how much that would have been worth, having that
Right.
front. But I think seeing him sit up there with my mom and dad, um, I remember, the games. I remember the day he died. I can remember where I was at school, what I was doing. Coach Brown affected everybody in the state.
Yeah.
Whether you were Auburn or Alabama, you had some kind of a affiliation with him, and he was so far ahead of his time. He was a good man. He
Right.
was good for those players. I always felt like he was a coach. I always felt like I wanted to be that guy. They always said Coach Bryant could take his guys and beat yours, and take your guys and beat his.
Yes.
And I just always felt like, in everything he preached, I think a coach, if you look at the people that they coached and watched how they turned out years later, when I was coaching at Alabama, of course, I knew a lot of players that played for Coach, a lot of alumnus, but Wayne Hall, who I played for at Auburn, played for Coach. Neil Callaway, but I met so many guys in the Letterman's Association when I coached at Bama, and just to watch how successful they are and how they become, solid men,
Right.
that's a credit to what a coach does. Same way with Coach Dot, that my teammates right now, I talk to him a lot, and what he's done. And then Coach Saban, look at what Coach Saban's done. Look at the success that these players have had. Not only this, and it's not just about the NFL. It's what guys do. There's a few percentage of guys that we coach that are going to be able to play in the NFL.
Right.
It's the next 40 years of your life, which is so important. And I think those coaches that coach men first and football second, that's what I believe I believe that's what the game's about.
So, Coach, I have thoroughly enjoyed this interview with you. As we walk out the door, could you please give us a preview of your football team through the spring and how you guys think you're going to do this fall?
Well, I think, like I mentioned, when I came in, we only had 47 guys on scholarship, only one quarterback. So we had to get to work. We signed, and I don't want to live in the portal, but the
Right.
portal, we got to take advantage of it. We had to use some of those things, during we took 11 guys at the break, and I want to say we signed 20 high school guys, 21 high school guys, and then we've taken. Let me see how many we've 3, 5, 6, 8, and about 12 guys in this last portal,
Mhm.
spring portal. So for around 24 guys, we've got brought in new. Um, starting on offense with our quarterbacks, we now have 5 quarterbacks. We took. Listen, I've lived that before. We're going to make sure we got a quarterback.
Right.
I like where our quarterbacks are at. Gavin Wimsat's probably the leader coming out of spring. Played at Kentucky last year. Big guy. Reminds me, he's built like Jalen Hurt. Can run, got a strong arm. I like our offensive line. I think our running backs. I think we got as good a running back room as anybody in you know, in our league. Um, wide receiver improved. We took a couple guys in the portal that I think will make a difference
Right.
with the guys that we got. And defensively, I was really impressed with the way our defensive line developed. We created some depth right there to where we could rotate. We're young at linebacker, but I like the athleticism we can run. And in the secondary, we had some improving to do in the secondary. That's kind of my baby, and I wasn't very happy where we were at. We've got a couple guys that we added this summer or this spring that will be here this summer. So,
right.
It's hard for me to tell because I don't know what everybody else has got. That's the hardest thing now is everybody's team changes from year to year, especially at our level.
Yes.
You get them poached and you get them recruited. The media asked me after a spring game, they're like, "Well, Coach, you decided to have a spring game, where most people aren't." I'm like, "Listen, they've been trying to steal my players since the day I got here.
Right.
So what's the spring game going to do? I want
Right.
to punish my team." All these guys at work, the way they've done fourth quarter drill, they've done spring practice, they've done everything we ask them to do. They want a chance to compete in the stadium.
Yeah.
Some of these kids that'll be the only time they really get to compete on the field is during the spring game.
Mm-hmm.
So I just was like, we're going to, but I don't know. It's hard for me to predict because I don't know what everybody else has got. We're going to take it game by game and, just play the next play, take it play by play, win the next play. And then, when they watch us play, I told our guys, I was like, listen, when people watch us play, we want them to say, man, those guys are fast, they're physical, they're tough, they're disciplined, and they will compete. Yes. I said, if you can do those 5 things, all right, you're going to win all the ones you're supposed to, and you're going to win some of those you're not supposed to.
Mm-hmm. So, Coach, I have thoroughly enjoyed this. The floor is all yours for anything else that you would like to say.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity. I've enjoyed it. There's no better thing that I enjoy doing than talking ball.
Yes.
I'm very, very thankful of the position that I have. Listen, it's not just because of me. As you mentioned, it's all the coaches that I worked for in the past, the influences that they've had on me. But not only that, it's the players. The players that I've had an opportunity to coach because they've been successful, they really gave me this opportunity.
Right.
If they hadn't been successful, I wouldn't have this opportunity. So I'm very thankful of that. And I'm thankful for the Jacksonville State alumni and the, supporters here that have been so good since we've been here. We're excited. We want to build this thing to, take it to a place it's never been before. And hopefully we can do that.
So, Coach, thank you for this awesome interview. Hopefully, we've not taken up too much of your time, and we would love for you to join us during the season and before to get a preview of your football team in Conference USA.
Absolutely. I enjoyed it.
All right. Thank you, Coach.
Thank you.
All right. So, guys, that is going to wrap up our interview there with Charles Kelly. Really do want to thank him for joining us, the new head coach of Jacksonville State and former Auburn football player